There are heavy guns and there are light guns. But which one is better for competition? I recently just released a Shadow 2 compact video where I took a handful of parts and brought it from good to great. Now, when I was doing that testing, it made me a little curious because this setup is very identical to my full-size Shadow 2. And so while I was doing testing, I thought I would actually bring my full-size Shadow 2 along and see what that was like. And the bigger premise for that is that these guns are very identical in terms of what's done to them. I've already done fairly extensive and exhaustive videos on what I've done to these and how they perform, and so I will leave those links in the description so you can see the full build list, everything. But one thing I want to point out is, what do they have in common? Well, on both guns, not only do they have the identical trigger group and action, but I've also upgraded them identically, even down to the trigger shoe. From an action standpoint, they're as identical as can be. Both of these guns have lock palm swell grips. Well, the Shadow 2 Compact comes in at about a 4-inch barrel, and with the brass grips on it, it comes in at about 36 ounces. Now, moving on, my Shadow 2, it does have a 4.9-inch barrel, and it comes in at a competition weight of 54 ounces. The Shadow 2 Compact has an aluminum frame, and the full-size Shadow 2 has a full steel frame. And it's important to note that a lot of the weight is on the muzzle on a Shadow 2. So when I go to do the shooting experience, you're really going to see where the weight difference starts to take effect on these. The first exercise I ended up taking a look at was the doubles drill. And in this drill, I set a IPSC target about 10 yards, and I just performed a set of doubles to see where the splits would land. Now, when I got up to speed with both of these, they produced identical splits and group sizes at about 0.19. At that range, they do about a 3 to 4 inch group. And I was actually surprised because I felt that the Shadow 2's extra weight would actually give it the advantage of being able to mitigate the recoil and absorb a lot more of it. Well, from a recoil impulse standpoint, I definitely feel a lot more in the lighter gun, and in the heavy gun, it just was a little bit more sluggish to return. Now, an important characteristic I noticed as I was shooting these is the feedback I was getting from the dot. On the full-size Shadow 2, what I saw on the dot was a slower and consistent dot presentation, whereas the Shadow 2 Compact was significantly wilder, but because my index had been refined for that, I was able to pull out the performance. So when we look at it from that perspective, the performance is identical, but the experience is different both in the recoil impulse and what you see in the sights. So the next drill I want to talk on is my transition drill. This is where I do about a 10-round string, and what you'll see is I will start on steel and alternate back and forth between paper at different distances. And the idea of this is to point out the bounce of the gun and how well I can engage these targets at speed. Strangely enough, between both these guns, and it also shows how much time I have on these guns, I pulled nearly identical accuracy and speed. Aside from the quantitative side to it, the one thing I will say is that the Shadow 2 Compact, I really felt I was at the limit of where I can go, both time and accuracy there. Because from my perspective, I felt I had to settle a little bit longer on targets to get solid hits on them. So as far as the Shadow 2 Compact, I was probably at my limit that day for that. Now, the extra weight of the Shadow 2, and I just haven't been on it for quite some time, I felt that if I had kept pushing it and grabbing for more speed, I could eventually get there and the accuracy would follow. So I will say that the weight of this gun, swinging from target to target, did give me more confidence to be a little bit more aggressive on the trigger. Now, let's take a step back and say, how does weight factor into that? Well, a lighter gun for me is easier to swing in transition, but I do have to be a little bit more patient with my shooting. Additionally, I'd say a lighter gun, it's easier to find the limit of the gun. Now, with a heavier gun, it actually kind of masks a lot of the details, and it's much more forgiving because you got to think there's just a touch more delay when you're moving in and out of targets. And that delay, and from the time you pull the trigger, could be different enough to where at least you can still get accurate hits while you're pulling it off simultaneously. Now for the final shooting drill, I ended up just doing my 25-yard bill drill from the barrel. So to keep it equitable, I just grab the guns from the barrel and just go shooting with this. Now this is where weight played a huge factor in the results on the shooting side of it. When I look at the first shot, with the lighter gun, I actually had a quicker first shot. But the thing is, the follow-up shots after that were actually slower. And so what I'm looking for at 25 yards are consistent dot presentations. And with the lighter Shadow 2 Compact, it was definitely very lively. And if anything, I had to actually take a step back and be more patient because the first two I did were pretty wild. So I had to adjust to that and get to that point where I could consistently put good shots on target. So this is where the heavier gun shines. Yes, it does take me a little extra time to get on the first shot because it takes me that much more time to pick up the gun and engage, but once I'm there, I'm there. And the dot presentation is what really stood out to me, is that number one, it moves much slower, and because the recoil impulse for me was a little softer, it made me a little bit more confident to re-engage the target. And every time I lit off a round, I felt confident calling my shots at 25 yards. So the thing is, with the extra weight, you get more stabilization and it comes back to zero a little more gently. So this is where weight really shines, is that if you're looking to do precision shooting at distance, especially under conditions of performance, this is where having that extra heavy gun makes a huge difference. And this is why you might see a lot of USPSA guys start to lean towards heavier guns, because they can be a touch more forgiving when you are trying to squeeze precision out of them. If I were to pick one of these guns, which would it be? I will say that's a huge depends for me, and here's why. So if I'm gonna shoot USPSA carry optics, Shadow 2 all day long, because number one, it's set up for it, it's optimized for it, so that's already the given, right? And particularly with this gun, I actually cannot run irons unless I get a different slide with it. And at major matches, we do have a bunch of tough shots at distance. This is going to be my go-to gun for that reason. Well, there is another component to this discussion, and it is the Shadow 2 Compact and where it fits. Well, because of its weight and size, I have options both in USPSA and IDPA. And if I were gonna have just one gun, I would keep this gun because I would feel confident competing with it in USPSA, whether that's either production or carry optics, because I'm comfortable shooting this platform. Now, additionally, I have more options in IDPA with where I can run divisions on this gun, whereas the Shadow 2 in IDPA is on paper basically illegal for any division because of its weight. And so that's it, guys. So I would say heavy guns are great for stabilizing at distance and also getting more aggressive with a touch of forgiveness. But if you have these shooting skills and you can take advantage of the athleticism of a lighter package, you can certainly do a lighter gun, which I've seen tons of shooters do. Also, if you haven't had a chance to watch what I've done to this gun, taking it from good to great, I will leave that video right here for you. Now, in case you're curious, because the Shadow 2 is still relevant for USPSA, I have a full complete video with not only where I go over everything I've done to it, but also the rigging as well, and I'll leave that video right here for you. But what do you guys think? Do you prefer heavy or do you prefer light? Sound off in the comments below, and until then, we will see you at the range.